And there we go. And we are live. Wow, what a guest this week. I didn't even know how to start the introduction other than that. Um, this is going to be a pretty interesting interview. So I'll
Might keep it that way.
start off with that, and I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. So my name is I'm CEO of Jolera. We are I guess an aggregate MSP or master MSP. Just summarized real quickly.
Awesome.
I can you have some questions for me. I'm happy to answer them.
I've got quite a few
All
questions,
right.
and for those tuning in, this is episode 4 of the channel CEO experience. I don't know what we're calling it, but yeah. So thrilled to have you joining us this week, and you've got a really interesting story. We were having some laughs here before we jumped on, and you're in a pretty interesting location today. So let's start with that.
Oh
Where are
God.
you dialing in from today?
I'm speaking to you all from Palma de Mallorca in south of Spain.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah, just sitting here on a boat, and it's raining outside, and no better way to kill the time than speaking to Mr. Lancaster himself.
Oh, well, there you go. I'll take it. All right, so we're gonna dig deep, right? We're gonna get into
Sure.
into the origin story and
Yes.
what makes you.
I've never told anyone this before, by the way. So you're gonna be the first audience to hear this. Okay.
Oh, awesome! I'm
Right.
honored. All right, well let's do this. Let's take it way back. All right,
Yeah.
so why don't we start with a little about yourself? So where you're
Sure.
from, where'd you go to
Sure.
school, what kind of kid were you?
Yeah.
Let's take it way back.
Yeah. So my parents are, as most people are immigrants in Canada. I'm Canadian. There's no such thing as there is a real Canadian, but we are immigrants nonetheless. We moved to Canada in the 1980s, the early 80s, when this guy named Pierre Trudeau that had changed the immigration rules and whatnot. So originally, I guess we were Indian, south of India, the very tip, and Sri Lanka. My father being from Sri Lanka, mom from the south of India. They left the country because there were some wars and stuff over there. I'm sure you've heard. Relatively unstable environment in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, and we moved actually in the late 70s to Africa, Nigeria, of all places. Nigeria being what it was, we spent about 10 years there. That was an interesting period of my life. So basically, from almost birth, from like, let's say, less than 1 years old to nearly the age of 10, we were in Africa. I got to tell you, you got to wait for the movie to hear that story because a lot of crazy things happened down there. Long story short, there was another war. War seems to follow me,
Hmm.
and we had to, jet in a real hurry. So we basically left everything we had there. Me being 10, I have a younger brother who was I think 7 or 6 at the time, and my mom and dad, and went to New York. The first flight out of uh, Nigeria at the time, because during the Civil War, and we ended up staying in New York for a year. Try to make a go of it there. We were living in a place called Queens. See, we all know Queens now, but coming from Africa to New York, I thought like Eddie Murphy did in like in Coming to America. This place sounds great, right? Lots of good stuff there. It wasn't what it panned out to be, or what I thought it was going to be. So we ended up leaving and moving to Toronto. And so, we kind of in between traveled, lived a bunch of places, but Toronto's where I called home for a very, very, very long time, probably upwards, probably 30, maybe 29 years. And Canada business has been great to us, been great to our family. And, it's kind of the foundation of where things began and really my opportunity in life started.
Wow. So you had a hell of a journey.
Yeah.
And I guess you're continuing the theme by being over in Europe right now. But so what are your earliest takeaways from growing up in Nigeria? I mean, um, you know,
Well,
starting
I
out
mean,
and yeah.
I mean, look, having international experience as a young lad really allowed me to not be afraid of the world. Right. I have lots of peers, lots of friends, even people that work at Chile now that find it difficult to try to leave their city, let alone their country, let alone their continent, and travel around. I've never had a problem with that because I realized that I've been my family and I have been just thrown into fires and places everywhere, and the human spirit and will to survive will prevail. And we've been successful as a family and prevailed no matter where we went. So you know it, when COVID even hit, I picked up my young family, and we moved to Europe. We moved to Portugal. Now I'm in Spain. We're just going everywhere that the world takes us. And the business is driving that for me, which is great. So I created an ecosystem, a business that allows it to drive, just our adventures around the world. And if you're not having fun, you're not going to do it well. I'm having fun, so kicking some ass.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what are your memories of your kind of formative years? Growing up
Yeah.
in Nigeria in schooling, and then maybe compare contrast that to maybe schooling in New York versus Toronto. I mean, were there parallels? Were there just
Yeah.
drastic differences?
So you get the schooling question a lot, and I've been asked to speak at some schools and whatnot. I've kind of turned them down because I don't want to lie, right? And I want to be honest about that stuff. African school system was very regimented. It was a British school system. It's you hand out. You can't do multiplying tables. You get the old stick,
Wow.
and all that stuff. And that's how it was back then, right? I'm 46 years old, so some time ago. And coming to Canada, and the North American system was a bit of a culture shock. There weren't any beatings. That was nice, and to start. But certainly, I wasn't the best student because I think I needed violence to keep me in in play properly. I was, we were poor when we came to Canada. We didn't have a lot of money. We came as immigrants. Mom and dad had to both go to work. I had to look after my little brother day and night because they worked multiple jobs. Learned to cook. I'm a pretty damn good chef today because I learned to cook literally out of scraps. And we struggled, but out of that struggle came resilience and came the need, the will, and the capability to survive under all conditions. So when I was in school here, unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of good grades because I was working at McDonald's part time. When I say part time, I mean 40 hours a week while going to school,
Wow.
right? And since the age of 13. And if you look at, and I don't want to say this to credit McDonald's too much, but I say McDonald's taught me more in my career there than I learned in any other job I've had. It taught me. I was a manager at the age of 16. I had my own store, and so they taught me in Burger University how to do a P&L, how to manage inventory, scheduling, like running a business 101. And they give you a 1 year crash course to become a manager in this stuff. And it's probably one of the biggest gifts I've been given that I haven't paid for. I was paid to learn, which is incredible.
That's fascinating.
um, and
Yeah.
going to yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, please keep going.
Yeah, going to school as far as university and whatnot. I went to high school at a local high school in the suburbs of Toronto. I went to university at a local university at the suburbs of Toronto, and I attended. I attended for up to 3 years. But one of the reasons I struggled throughout my schooling kind of journey was that I was always interested in computers, right? It only so because when I was 13, my mom took a major loan out. I think it was $2,400 at the time. $2,400, 1984 or five was a lot of money, and it took her 5 years to pay it off or something like that. But she bought me a computer just on a whim that, hey, look, this kid's out there with his friends and he's running around and nothing good's going to come of this. And if I can get him, to focus on something, all that energy, it might work out. So I started tinkering with this computer. It was, they didn't have a hard drive. We were using floppy disks back then, and not 86. If you remember that those days, right?
Absolutely.
And I just started building computers. I started, building for family members, for friends, and it kind of progressed by interest, right? And, we started then doing some nefarious stuff online with music downloading, and remember the stuff kids used to do, playing games and BBS boards and all that fun stuff. Um, and the rest is history, right? And there's nothing else I know how to do. So while I was intending to go to school, there was teachers trying to teach me stuff that I had no interest in whatsoever. And the way they were teaching was like, hey, read this book, memorize it, and then write me an essay telling me what you read, right? It's not critical thinking. It's not, and if you don't agree with them, you get an F. You have to agree with the general perspective, the narrative, right? It wasn't for me, so I tried the best I could at it. But and when I was in university and struggling through that, one of the profs I met actually, who spent some time with me at a coffee shop after. Said, you know what, man, I got to tell you, I hear you answering the questions. You're always challenging me in class. I don't think this is the place for you because this is a compliance-based society. You're not a complier, so you need to like go do something with yourself because you can do great things. And I took his advice actually. And I just said, screw it. I went and I worked at IBM as a summer student because they needed smart IT kids and automated my whole job. I didn't work many hours, was paid 40 hours a week because I scripted everything. And, and, that kind of, led to, great things in the future. And I left there and started my first company at the age of, I
So
think, 19 or 20.
we'll get into that in a second. But one of the reasons why I really like asking that kind of the schooling or education question is
Yeah.
that we're now 4 for 4, and if you include myself, 5 for 5, where the answer was I struggled. I wasn't a good, I either struggled or I just wasn't cut out for formal
Yeah.
education or schooling. And I think that's a common theme, right?
Yeah.
With business owners, entrepreneurs that,
Mhm.
maybe it's the experiential learning versus being,
Yeah.
sitting down and being, taught classroom style and having to comply, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
It seems to be a pretty common theme, at least for the first 4 episodes. And like I said, myself included. So, it's always
Yeah. I mean,
interesting to hear
school
that
is
kind of
great.
response.
I hate to say bad things about it because it's meant to produce office and factory workers. You go
Mhm.
there, you churn out, and you'll become a worker like the way society wants you to be, right? And I think there's those of us that just don't fit in that mold, and we have to elevate above it or be crushed by what society wants of us. Right? You
That's
and I probably are a product of our own free will as opposed to what people want us to do.
I think that's a very, very true statement. And I certainly rebelled, and I was as I mentioned in one of the episodes. I mean, I mean, I say barely got out of high school, and the luck of the draw, and actually ended up getting into university
Mhm.
and graduating. So
Yeah,
it wasn't out of a desire to. It was more the necessity and keeping up with just that's what
the
you did in
Joneses, right? You
society.
have to
Yeah,
slog it out. Yeah, you have to
that's
slog
it.
it out.
Yeah. And not enough about me. So it sounds like and I've actually heard that, not obviously in the kind of the interview or on this interview series, but heard in the past that people underestimate the systems and the education, the processes that McDonald's, right,
Yeah,
is built around,
yeah,
and what you actually can learn from that. I know I think there's probably Harvard business reviews or case studies about the McDonald's way and infrastructure
yeah.
and just how they do it. But it sounds like it was a pretty impactful to you.
Well, I always tell people when I retire one day, I think I'll go back and work at McDonald's
Wow.
because it was that much fun, and I think I can bring something that I've learned now, maybe make that even a little better if it's possible. But their system is pretty
Yeah.
damn
Yeah. I'm sure you can figure something out.
good. Yeah.
All right, so we're up to kind of the high school years, or just beyond high school. So you mentioned
Yeah.
you had an internship, or you had I guess was it IBM? Is that what you said?
Yeah. IBM,
Yeah.
correct. Yeah.
So take me through that, and then kind of the next phases, beyond that position.
Yeah. So I mean, IBM was great. Like I said, it's good on a resume. And back then, I thought I need a resume, and I didn't know what I was going to do. And this technology thing was neither here nor there. And no one taught what we do today. We're networking infrastructure. If you were a computer guy, then you were a programmer, right? You go in to teach you to program, to code, and it was C plus at the time. That was the big language at the time, C sharp. And no one, and that wasn't my interest. And I was interested in the actual, the communication part of it. How did things talk? TCP/IP, even token ring back then. What's all that about? And that was all new, right? IPv4 was new. All that stuff was new. So and as a kid, you're like a genius. Everyone else is still talking about the way things worked in the 1970s, and you're coming out with a good understanding of the IP stack, and they're like, wow, this guy. So we took that, and I started doing work in small businesses in my neighborhood because I knew where mechanic shops were. I knew where the small businesses were, and I lived there for a long time. So started doing some work fixing their computers, taking care of their computers, and just doing stuff like that. And then while I'm at IBM, there's a guy sitting next to me and hearing my part-time job story, saying, "Dude, you should do this full time. Like, you're making as much money at IBM as you are doing that." I said, "You know what? I think you're right." So literally, just told my boss, his name was Barry. Still have a lot of respect for the man today because he took it like a man. I said, "Look, man, I got to go, and I'm gonna go start a business." So he's like, okay, Alex. And you got to understand, this was the dot com boom time, right? This was the mid 90s, late 90s, when that everything was .com, money was being thrown everywhere, everyone's getting a lot of cash, and things were blowing up. So through my network at IBM, I managed to find an investor. I'm not going to mention the name, but if he's watching this, he'll know who it is. And we found an investor who's going to put $1 million into a startup to do infrastructure and to do support and all that stuff.
Wow.
So we went to the races. Within 90 days later, we had an office. We had 30 people. I hired a lot of people. I was the CEO. I had a partner, who Joseph Kanizer, still with us today, who was our also CTO, and also one of my best friends. Has been one of my best friends throughout my life. And we kind of just started things off, and we hired people, we got customers, we went knocking on doors, we did everything the way you normally do it. However, as sometimes happens when you have investors and when you have a majority holding kind of chairman on the board who's not an IT person, who doesn't have the patience to kind of stay the course and wait the journey. We had disagreements on how the business was to be run and how we were taking money out of the company, and it didn't work out. It led to a multi-million-dollar lawsuits and all kinds of fun stuff, and that company had to fold as a result of all that stuff, right? So because me and Joe had enough of that stuff, and then we took some time off, Joe and I, because that was pretty rough. Put it this way: you build something with your sweat, blood, and tears. This is a company that I slept in the office every day. I only went home for weekends. I slept on the sofa in the office. Like, this is what we did, right? Literally, I had clothes there. You wash your face in the washroom, and like it was startup.com times.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
And in fact, a lot of the guys that were part of the team then are part of the team now still, right? Because they've kind of come along with the journey because they've always been inspired by what we're doing. But so then we took a year off, me and Joel, and kind of reconnected, and what you see today is Jolera is a 22-year long journey from that point to get to where we are. But this time we didn't take any investors, we didn't take any venture capital, we didn't do any bank financing. We just did it the old-fashioned way, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, right?
Wow.
One employee, so one brick at a time, build a house.
That's amazing. So, I guess reflecting back on that, that business and that time frame. I mean, do you view that as a failure? Do you view that as a success? What's the takeaway from that?
I mean, that's a good question, and I think you know the answer already. There aren't any real mistakes in life. I mean, there's mistakes. Don't get me wrong. Business mistakes are less of a mistake than personal mistakes are. Because business mistakes you learn from a lot. I mean, it's trial and error a lot of the time. Personal mistakes, on the other hand, you just shouldn't do. Right? It's a different story altogether. You should know better. But business mistakes you don't know. So I don't think that that first company was a mistake per se. It was a great way to learn what to do, what not to do. Right? People ask me today, "Hey, Alex, why did you take the company public?" Well, we kind of did that first run, and it didn't go so well. So I'm, I've been down that path before, and I think I'll stick the way we are right now, right? And so there's lots of lessons I wouldn't have learned, and the worst thing would be, we did that company for 2-3 years, and we built it because we had capital, we can go fast, right? This one's taken a lot longer, but we are also much bigger, right? We're 30 times the size of the last company, but this way, what's given us is deep roots, and deep roots create strength in every way, character in the business, financially, and customer loyalty, like. And it's hard to take down a tree with deep roots, right? As opposed to just pulling out a weed, So it wasn't
I
a
love,
mistake.
I love that. I love that expression. I mean, that's so true. Um,
But
so you guys took some time off, right,
yeah,
and kind of regrouped,
yeah,
and then said, "Look, we want to jump back into it again." And as you mentioned, right, this time it was brick by brick, person by
yeah.
person.
Mhm.
What did you want to do different? With the with Jolera versus what you did in the past.
Well, the first thing we knew is we weren't going to take on anyone else's money, and we weren't going to take on anyone else's opinion. That's the first thing we knew. Okay, and so Joe and I have always been really aligned. We have a very common perspective on things. I mean, what 23 years, 24 years between the two companies. I don't think we've had a fight, like a real fight. Like, what I mean?
Wow.
Yeah, like we kind of just talk about stuff, and somehow we kind of agree on everything. Well, there's times where I have to give in. I know what's important to him because I've known him his whole life, and I'll just say, okay, fine. And then he knows that I'm a bullheaded SOB, and I'm not going to just let you go. So if I'm really stuck on something, best to let it go, right? So, and it's been great, and so this firm, it's like I said, it's been one step at a time. When we got into it, it was okay. We're going to do what we did before, but technology evolves, and the needs of customers evolve, and the needs in the market evolves, and Jolera, as a result, has really evolved immensely over the last 23 years. We started off as an MSP. We were just, we had direct sales guys, we had clients, we had stuff that every other MSP that's probably listening to your event today have. It took us a while to understand, and we'll get through that a little later on today. But I can tell you how we got to where we are today, and that was a journey, and it was a journey that didn't just happen overnight. It's something that came out of need, which is why we're here today.
Yeah, that's awesome. So we'll get to kind of the evolution of Jolera in a moment, but I think with one thing that's always, I think, fascinating, we talked about, again, kind of this common thread about education, and
Yeah.
kind of a spectrum of a disdain versus being rebellious or
Yeah.
what have you. But do you find yourself with with habits? Do you have a kind of set routines that you have to follow? Do you have habits that you've developed along the way that you think contribute to your success?
Well, I get this a lot, right? I read a lot about it. Chris Black, our CRO, he's got all these routines and stuff, and like I didn't have the luck in life to build a routine, right? Because I never worked for anybody where I had a routine. It's literally always working for yourself. The first 20 years, my travel schedule was ridiculous, right? So you're flying out, flying in at all odd hours, morning and day. Then you have young kids, as that. And I had kids late in life at like 35, right? Because I didn't have the time to have kids before. There's events that you have to go to in the morning, golf tournaments. Sometimes they're in the afternoon. Then there's meetings, or sometimes then you have every day client dinners, entertaining clients till 1 o'clock at night, 2 o'clock at night. Come home, rinse, repeat. Hopefully, the next day's schedule starts at 10 o'clock, not 7 a.m. Like, how do you develop a routine? So my routine really was to get shit done, just survive, right? Do 90% of the time I spent is doing what needed to be done that day. And I did 10% of what needs to be done for tomorrow or the day after. Right. So that's, you're always chipping away for the future, but dealing with the fires that are here now. We didn't have a huge staff most of the time. A lot of it was done ourselves. Right. So it's difficult to say I had a routine. My routine was to survive and just keep pushing forward. We had a solid mission, we had purpose, and we had our people. Those things kept me grounded and connected. I knew what I had to do. I knew where I had to go, and I knew people depended on me. So routine aside, that keeps me focused.
Yeah. So I guess you mentioned you have some, you got a family now, you got some small kids. I mean, have you
Yeah.
noticed, I guess, how do you try to instill your drive or your work ethic or kind of your outlook on life on them? Are they receptive? Are they at the age where they can be
Yeah. I mean, they're
receptive or?
They're 12 and 10, 13 and 10, kind of moving up into. So they're young girls, and you know, it's tough because, like I said, they're part of the traditional school system. They go to traditional schools. We have no other option, right?
Mhm.
And the school teaches you that you go to school, you become this, you become that, you do this, you do that. And it's funny because just the other day, my oldest daughter asked me, "So, Dad, like, what'd you do in university, and how did you finish school, and so on and so forth?" And I had to take a pause in that because the traditional, answer would have been, "Oh, well, I went to this, I studied computer science, blah blah blah," but I didn't do those things. I had to, for the first time, because she was able to understand, tell her, "Look, there's different ways to get to a destination, right? And everyone has to pick their path. And my expectation of my children isn't that of the standard kind of South Indian parent would have, where, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, go to school, get this degree. Where I'm going to say, look, find what it is that you love." And I told her that. What is it you love doing? What is your passion in life? I'm here just to help you find that passion, not to force you to become a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer. Once you find that passion, then they'll something, your calling will find you, right? And I wish someone had told me that when I was younger. I wasn't given that option. I was just told, listen, this is what you have to do, and if you don't work out, you're a failure in life. um, you know that didn't work out for the people that told me that, but but it is what it is. But like I said, it's I'm happy my kids um, are getting to the age now where they can understand, and I want to be a different type of parent and a different type of guardian to them than non-traditional, put it that way, than
Yeah.
we've received in life.
Yeah. It sounds like you're almost, you're facilitating or helping enable kind of their direction or their growth, their, following their pursuits or passion. Again, they're relatively young, right? And so
Young,
that'll
and
come.
they're lucky to have that. But even in our
Yeah.
hiring process at Jolera, like I'm not one. I always tell people, like, I don't. Education is important, yes, and it does help a lot of people. But if you look at someone's journey, and you talk to them and realize where they've gotten to in life and how they've gotten there, you have to look deeper than just what's on a piece of paper,
Yeah,
right? Some of the smartest people in the company aren't the most formally educated people. They're the people that are most driven, that have the most, will to survive and the will to succeed. And I look for that more than anything else.
I love,
Attitude.
I love it. I love it. I noticed in your bio on the site that there's quite a bit of giving back.
Sure.
So tell me how that plays into kind of
Yeah.
your development and what's that mean to you?
So our business, Jolera as a whole, as a standard MSP, was founded on giving back. Like the whole concept of not for profits, right? Because when we were startup, things were rough. Like, I mean, the economy was just bouncing back from that .com recession. Things were, weren't ideal. So, we said, how are we going to get customers again now? We're just going to have to give it away for free. I mean, we didn't have any expenses. Joe and I were both, thankfully supported by our parents to some degree, right? Lived at home at the beginning. So, we didn't have a lot of risk to take. So we literally went to a bunch of not-for-profits and charities. Some of us still are clients today, by the way, 20 years later, and said, hey, we'd love to do your IT for you. We're just a bunch of smart IT guys. We don't, have a lot of credibility, but if you give us a chance, you don't have to pay us. And so, not for profits didn't have a lot of cash, still don't. And they said, you know what? Okay, like we'll give you a shot. So they let go of the providers that they were being charged money for, and literally sometimes for years we did free work for these guys, and they just give us references. They acted as a reference, right? And some of the organizations we worked for, we did the World Youth Day when Pope John Paul II came to Toronto back in, I think, 2000, 2001. Right, that was a big, big, big event for Canada. So we were the IT provider for that. So it's funny. You're driving on the highway and you see, Scotia Bank of Canada. You see Pizza, which is a big pizza chain here, and then Jolera. What is this Jolera stuff doing there, right? But we were, once again, we donated a lot of that money back to the church that they paid us, which was a lot to begin with, and that kind of snowballed into like working with some of the biggest not for profits nationally and internationally. We ended up working with the UN. We ended up working with WHO. Like, so you take this concept, and we were the most prolific known IT provider in the NGO space in Canada within like 6 or 7 years. We had a near monopoly on it, right? But then once we saturated that market, we had to obviously change into different industries and whatnot. But economies changed. But when we were smaller, we had the ability. We literally did a lot of stuff for free. So we've continued to do that through the corporation, through Jolera. We have a budget every year. It's allocated towards charitable golf tournaments, towards donations here, donations there, and just be part of the communities that we work in. It's important to us. It's kind of the fabric of the organization, right? You never forget where you came from.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's awesome. It's well said. So let's I guess jump into it. So tell us about you kind of heard the origin story of Jolera, but tell us, take us through the development of Jolera over the last 20 some years.
Yeah, so I mean, the standard MSP for the first 15 years, we're doing what all the other MSPs do. Like I said, work, execute. But one of the things that we struggle with, and this kind of led to the decision. A few things led was, you know, scaling fast. Right, we realized what was happening in the market about 5, 6 years ago. There was a change in the market. There was a lot of acquisitions happening in our space, a lot of mergers, a lot of consolidation. Right, so we're like, okay, we have people that were our competitors before that are becoming bigger through merger. They're taking on private equity and buying other companies, so that acquisition stuff's happening. How do we compete in this space? Do we want to go through the same journey again of now looking at private equity or looking at this or taking bank financing or being acquired? I don't think that our journey was done at the time. So I realized 5, 6 years ago that doing what we were doing, the status quo, wasn't going to be successful for the future. So that's one thing. On the flip side, so now say we want to scale and grow. Okay, we need money to do that. There's two ways to do it. One is you take a capital injection, you go and you massively scale with capital, right? You create capacity, and then you build a bigger funnel for more salespeople, and you grow that way, or you go through acquisition, right? Just adding headcount or adding revenue. Um, and neither of it seemed like something that we wanted to do. So what's the third option? What was prohibiting us from being able to scale and grow fast? What it was infrastructure, right? In multiple ways. We needed more sales guys. That costed money. Okay, so forget, we couldn't do that. Now we needed more. We need a bigger knock. We need bigger call centers. We need stuff that's more redundant. We need better, more agents. So we have reduced wait times. We need more expensive tools, software, hardware to make all of the stuff automate and make it work better. So that takes money too. So we realized, okay, shit, we can't do all of this because we're gonna have to take on capital. So what do we want to do? Well, one of the gaps we saw in the industry was like simple things like a knock. Okay, now today there's a lot of providers that are doing this different ways, but back then you couldn't just have a knock or a help desk unless you built it yourself or you outsourced it to India or the Philippines or someplace else, right? That was offshore markets and whatnot. But the feedback from the customers that were using these offshore services wasn't good because we had customers that were using an offshore provider that would come back to us saying, "Oh, God, that was awful," right? So I knew that us trying to scale through this full offshore model, which we tried, by the way, we tried it, about 7 or 8, 9 years ago, I think, right? It just didn't work. Our customer experience was bad. Our the ability to integrate culturally was very difficult because culture is important. That's very important to business. So we said that wasn't it either. So then we said, okay, look, what do we do really well? One thing we did well is we really did operations well. Okay, we had a solid knock team, we had solid service desk, we had solid tools because we invested in all this stuff, and it was working well. So maybe we take and my peers and stuff in the industry, I had a lot of guys I knew still do that was struggling the same way we were. They had to either take on capital, their service desk was crappy, they missed alerts, all that stuff. It was just not good. So I said, look, why don't we focus on being execution? Right, and find a few partners now. That's just an idea that came to me actually in my garage one day. That need help with excellence and execution, but they are really good with customers. They have a whole bunch of customers. They have great relationships. Blah blah blah. And that's the birth of the whole kind of channel plan that we had. Right. So how do we get more sales guys? Well, our channel partner is going to have sales guys. That's good. So that's covered. Okay. How do we get more infrastructure? Well, if we partner with the right hardware and software manufacturers, they will give us the infrastructure if we change the game. If we change the narrative, we change the story, we let them go to market differently, we show them different avenues. This as a service thing was coming out, right? That's the beginning of the as a service kind of movement. Okay, let's take their stuff and talk about as a service. Most hardware manufacturers at the time, even today, by the way, sadly, have no understanding or grasp of what as a service means. Right? You have the few successful guys like Microsoft, Salesforce that have taken it and run with it, right? And they're killing it now, right? But the traditional, security companies or even server, desktop, compute companies, they're not at that level yet. They're still a generation behind in thinking. So our journey now is like to shepherd these guys down that path. There, let me show you the successful models we've built that we've done for other manufacturers. Here's how it works. Going to our partners and saying, in this case, people that used to be our competitors, right? Taking your competitors and making them into your partners. That's a very difficult thing to do because, especially in a confined market like where we started off in Canada, where everyone knew who we were. And so the first 2 years were like, really, you guys? That's madness. But it's it's a journey, right? And I say today, after quite the trek, we are at a place now where those companies, many of them who have never even talked to us before because we were so butting heads and deals all the time, today are like our customers.
Wow.
Which is, and when the first one came over, I was just one of the biggest accomplishments in my life because I'm like, you know what? After banging your head against the wall for this long, finally people are starting to understand what you're trying to do, and that's amazing, right? So that's kind of the journey from like being an MSP to what we are today, which is an aggregate master MSP, which is working with MSPs. We don't sell direct. We only work with other integrators, manufacturers, and as a service providers to make their stuff better, right? And provide that layer.
So I love the phrase that you threw out there was excellence in execution, right? You
Yeah.
guys said we just want to, we know our strengths, and it's building around this concept of excellence and
Yeah.
execution. And I don't know, maybe subconsciously, maybe that's going back to McDonald's. Maybe that's running systems, and
Yeah.
it's absorbing that and then putting that into practice. Moving forward, and you found a niche, and you've run like hell with it, which is fantastic.
Well, I don't want to be misrepresent myself here by saying I've run like hell with anything because what I've done is I had a concept and I have sheer determination, right? But
Mhm.
really, we're as good or as bad, I'd like to say as good as we are today because myself coming to realize my strengths and weaknesses. It's one of the key things, right? And as leaders, we got to look at ourselves and say, what are you really good at? What are you bad at? You'll be a fool to lie to yourself because you're only lying to yourself and you're hurting yourself, right? So it took about 15 years, by the way, for that to happen. Because before that, I was full of myself. And I'm great. Oh, this is great. This has been going really well. But then you realize when the time came to make that shift that, okay, look, I'm really good at some things, I'm bad at others. Then I had to go and I had to find people that were better than me and then admit that to them, okay? Which is not always easy. Like you dude are better than me, or gal, you're better than me at this, and I need people like you around me. And once I started to do that, was able to surround myself with smarter people than me, right? That's when things start to really kick ass. That's when we start to scale. Then the good times began.
Look, I think it's another constant theme, right? Is that when you, and we were talking about this before we jumped on. I mentioned it probably early in my career that I always thought I was the smartest person in the room, and realized that,
Yeah.
that was probably never the case. But when you start to surround yourself with
Right.
folks that are smarter in different areas, and realizing that you have, certain strengths that you really need to focus on and maximize, and you bring others in that complement what you do, and or can do the things that you think you're good at better.
Hmm.
I think the CEOs that are, self-aware like that, and then put that into practice, the ones that really build world-class organizations, and that's seems like what you have done to a
Well,
T.
that's a hard obstacle to overcome for me. It was very hard, but I'm glad I was able to do that now, because look at the people around me. I mean, you've met some of them already. I think right? And they're a lot better than I am.
Yeah. So, what's one thing that's happened in the business that good, bad, or indifferent, that you couldn't have predicted, 20 years ago?
So as a company, we've always taken risks, right? Risk is, I think, part and parcel with being an entrepreneur, and what really makes successful businesses successful people. Um, Sometime in 2006, I think, was it 2006? I'm trying to go back now. I had this idea to be the world's first wireless MSP, right? And this is Jolera is going pretty well now. We have some cash flow, things are happening. And I said, okay, you know what? This is when long range Wi-Fi first came out, point to multi-point. Companies like Prox and Redline Communications, they were just kind of getting in the market with some new technology, next gen technology. And Canada had good infrastructure in the core cities, but in the rural areas, and this is still a problem today in some cases, not solved for yet. Now 5G and LTE has done some of that, but it's not fully there yet. Uh, we literally went out. I met with the mayor of a town about an hour and a half away from the Greater Toronto area, and convinced him that I would be able to provide infrastructure for the fire stations, the ambulances, the hospital, the municipal infrastructure, and all the residents of the area. And they believed in me, and believed in Jolera. So we spun up a company, which is a side or a spin up to Jolera, called Aaron Connects, which is the town of Aaron was what it's called, right? And we literally built towers. Went out there, and I'd never built a tower, pulled a fiber straight in my life. Okay, I learned how to build towers. We had rented cranes and did some crazy things. Once again, sheer will and tops like knowledge or ability every time. Okay, and so you got me up there, and some of the guy, our chief architect, John, is still with us today. He was one of the guys, and we were climbing towers with no safety harnesses. We couldn't afford to buy one at the time, and we're going up hundreds of meters in the air and like hanging things. And it's winter
Wow.
time. It's -40 outside. I got my Jeep TJ with a rope tied to my waist, and one of my staff driving the thing forward is pulling me up somebody's chimney. So I can hang an antenna on his house. Like, so we did some pretty cool things back then. Needless to say, the technology wasn't where it is today. And when it would rain, there was something called rain fade, which affected everyone. And all of a sudden, we get 400 calls coming to our call center, which at the time only had 4 agents in it. And it supported all of Jolera customers too, that the internet's not working in their house, or the fire station can't get emails or something like that, right? So I didn't sleep. So for the year and a half, 2 years that operated, literally, I lived in my Jeep nearby so I could go to people's houses at all odd hours. It to some degree took my mind or my focus off of the core business, which was financing all that, Jolera. Joel was kind enough to run it at the time with the staff, and I took a small contingent of people to go build this Aaron network out. Anyway, long story short, lost a lot of money, and took a beating in every fashion or form, and ended up selling it to the local hydro company for cents on the dollar. And I think they just wanted the customers. They went and built out the fiber anyway for everyone, right? But it was a learning lesson. That's one of the few things that I wish I'd never done. Looking back, although having said that, we end up becoming the best wireless installer in the city. I was invited to be a professor at a local career college, speaking on wireless technology and doing all that stuff because no one knew wireless better than Jolera did at that time.
Wow.
So, but crazy idea, crazy story. Just glad to be out of it. You know.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you didn't have to teach a course on risk because climbing towers without safety
Yeah,
features,
yeah, exactly. Well, when you're young, you're invincible, right? Remember, nothing could have killed me back then.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I hear you. I hear
Yeah,
you. I know that guilty of that one too, man. Um,
exactly.
so you said, I guess during that period, you weren't sleeping. Anything
Yeah.
today keep you up at night?
Well, look, lots of things keep us up, right? I'll tell you what kept me up back then was, for the first 15 years was, oh my God, if we miss an alert tonight for someone's firewall or the internet's down or the exchange is the worst. CEOs are like the best monitoring system for exchange service. Back when Microsoft used to, okay, before even our own knock or anybody, someone's CEO would call, hey, my email's not working.
Hmm.
And so literally I would go to sleep at night, every night with heartburn and like butterflies and fear because we knew we had an option. But mistakes happen, human errors happen. We were fully like manual back then, right? And today we have all kinds of AI and automation, RPA, and everything. But back then it was human proof, foolproof. It wasn't foolproof rather, and that kind of kept me up. Today it's different problems, right? Today we're a well-oiled machine. Do we miss alerts from time to time? Sure, but it's usually an anomaly because something slipped through some kind of automation crack and multiple people checked some behind it. But it's not something that worries me because it very, very, very rarely happens. Today, I'm worried more about things like what's happening in the world today, like the wars in the world, because it affects the economics of what we do. It affects the there's recession coming on board. There's so many things that historically I thought we knew how to navigate, but every recession, every economic downturn, every change is new, and it's not going to pan out the way it did exactly like last time, right? So it's a learning process. So what I worry about, just not for myself, but for the world as a whole right now, really is where we're going, right? And when we were younger people, I think we felt everything was out of our control, and we just kind of want to go with the flow, and things happen to us. Today, in our more, I don't say old age, but more mature age, I believe what we do really counts, and how the decisions we make do have an impact and can change the world. And so being, at least for Jalera, tasked with making some of those decisions wears on you. And I sleep a little less at night knowing that, it's not just me and my wife and kids that are the impact of the things I do and say or not do and say, but it's all the hundreds of people that work for me across the world and the thousands of customers we have.
Yeah.
So that's what
Yeah,
keeps me awake.
totally get it. So we're kind of moving out here. So do you have any piece of advice, anything that you give to, MSP business owner or just any other CEO, C level, any piece of advice or anything they should be mastering today, to make themselves prepared for the future?
Well, look, I'm not an expert at anything really. I'm a jack of all trades. What I can tell you what served me well, right, has been agility and being nimble. See, we were always the small dog coming up, at least in Canada and then in Europe now, where we spent a lot of time as well. And now, as we, further our efforts in the States, we're the small dog. And we've come across partners and, customers that, and I see them kind of locked in their own internal bureaucracy, their own internal kind of massiveness, right? And what I've always tried to do, despite the fact that we've also grown into like a good mid-sized company now, and we by any stretch of we should have lost that agility a long time ago. Well, I keep focusing on that, keeping a relatively flat management structure, so you don't have to have all the bureaucracy and red tape to get something done. Um, Giving authority to my lieutenants and my generals to make the decisions that they need to make, because you really got to trust people, right? That also was part of it, was a journey, but I mean, I've gotten there. You know, agility gives us the ability to basically see all the gaps. We work with a lot of technology partners right now. We know what software, what automation tools, what hardware. We know what things are out there, what services are being offered. So we're able to look at that and say, okay, where are the gaps? How do we make that better? How do we fill those gaps? Right? We need to be able to execute fast and purposefully with a customer first mentality. That's really important. Customers need to be put first. I mean, we can say this 1,000 times, but if you're not doing it, you're not going to be successful because they have alternatives today, right? So, we are. I'd say that what I feel. Talk to my exec team. Fast the market, fast, 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 fast. The world wants stuff fast. That's why fast food has done so well, right? So you can't just sit there and say, "Oh, this is going to take 7 years." No, no, we got it. We got to get products out there. We got to get them solid. We got to get them execute. We got to get them fast, and that's the only way. So we're not trying to recreate the wheel. We're just trying to make a better, more efficient, more powerful wheel, right?
It's
And
awesome.
that's kind of what we're doing.
Yeah. So along those lines, what does Jolera look like in 3 years, 4 years, 5 years from now?
So that's a question that probably made sense 5 years ago when like you had the luxury of having a 1, 2, and 3, 4, 5 year plan, right?
Mhm.
I don't know if today it's even relevant anymore because like you really think about it, like things are changing so fast,
Yeah.
right? Things are really moving at a pace. There's so much disruption happening right now. We've got AI, we've got VR, we've got RTP, we got all kinds of stuff happening. All these acronyms, as a service this, as a service that, like, and any one thing or combination of several can disrupt anyone's core business plan, right? So it's hard to say. I can tell you that we'll continue to innovate. So our innovation is our number one thing. We have to always stay one step ahead of everyone else. We need to have we need to see problems coming. We need to solve for them before they get here, and then make sure people are aware we're doing that, right? And, thank you for helping us do that through the show. But it's important. Um, so bringing value to our customers through as a service. That's our number one core right now. Like make sure we make the lives of integrators, VARs, ISPs, ASPs, MSPs easier, right? Help them get to the destination faster. I wish someone had come to me 15 years ago and said, Alex, okay, you got 20 guys working for you now. You want to do this for the rest of your life? No, okay, I can help you get from here to there. And you can do it in 2 years as opposed to 20 years. No one gave me that option, right? Jolera today, our model is built on giving partners that option where you can scale hyper fast now, focus on your core strengths. And if you want to build your own service, that's great. Build it parallel to us. We'll teach you exactly how we're working with your customers and take it off the races yourself. Even if we can serve as an incubator, great, right? Because like what you're doing, our journey is to help the channel. And that's what I'm trying to do.
That's awesome. Sounds like you're doing a hell of a job. So one, I want to thank you for taking some time out and taking us through your journey and how you guys have gotten here. And it sounds like you're hitting your stride, and it's going to be exciting to watch you guys, moving forward now that, I've become, aware of you guys, and I'm a massive fan of what you're doing and how you're solving these problems. And so good on you for that. And so as we wrap up, I guess tell the audience where they can find you. Are you on social media? Is it just go through the site?
Sure.
How do we find you?
Well, first, Kevin, I want to thank you for your time today and for allowing us to be featured on your show. Yeah, like I said, you're a man that's quite well known in the industry, and I really appreciate your faith in us and your support. Um, as far as finding me is concerned, we can anybody can be found online these days. I think we all know that. I'm on LinkedIn, Alex Shan, and if you want to know a bit more about Jolera, www.jolera.com, and it's all right there. And we're happy to take any questions.
Awesome. Well, look, you got a hell of a story, hell of a journey, and I can't wait till you get back. I guess North America. I was about to say stateside, but North America side, and
Yeah.
hope we can get together at some point here in the near future. So
Something tells me we will, Kevin. Thank you very
awesome.
much.
Yeah. Well, thanks very
Have,
much, and yep, we'll
have a
end
great day.
this here now. Thank you.
Cheers.
Looks like